In this lecture, I'm going to cover the King's Gambit. The King's Gambit is a king's pawn opening, which starts by e4, e5, and then white plays f4. So why does white play f4? Well, white wants to divert this e-pawn. Hopefully black will capture, or it will move the black pawn out of the center because white wants central control. And now black must decide if he wants to take the pawn. The games have showed if black takes the pawn that his pieces sort of are in disarray, and it's not easy for white to recapture or to get a pawn back. So it's another case of giving up something for something else. So white's going to give up a pawn, and hopefully white's going to get an attack, and black's not going to have a very good position, and then white can more easily attack. So most of the time black will take the pawn. This is called the King's Gambit accepted, and occurs in about 57% of the games. So let's just cover maybe 2 lines in the King's Gambit accepted. So let's say black takes the pawn. Well, let's back up and say, well, why didn't? If you notice, the queen could come to here and then check the king. Well, if black decides to do that, then white will just push this pawn up, and the queen has to move away, so the check does nothing. So now if black takes, white will now play knight to f3, and this is a very common move in the King's Gambit accepted because it stops the queen from coming to, especially to h4, but potentially this square too. It also develops peace and hopefully prepares kingside castling. So now what's the most common move is that black will play g5. It plans to push the pawn up, sort of evicting the knight from its home on f3. And then white plays h4, a strike back at the pawn. And black will now just play g4. Now notice, that the queen can't obviously come to h4 because it will be captured by the rook. So now the knight has to move. We'll go to e5. What's happening is that it's the knight is actually attacking f7, a vulnerable position, and white has a plan of potentially moving its bishop here and attacking that pawn again. So black will play knight to f6, actually protecting this pawn here from the queen. And then white will play bishop c4, now hitting again this pawn, just like I mentioned before. Black plays d5. White captures. And then black will play bishop to d6, attacking the knight, getting rid of one of the attackers, or attacking an attacker which is actually undefended. d4. White, gets a pawn in the center, frees his bishop, which is now attacking this pawn, and now this pawn protects the knight. Multifaceted move. The black's knight now comes to h5 to defend the pawn, and then both sides castle. And that's where I'll leave off this line. So let's back up. To black's third move, which was g5. I quickly want to cover another variation, which is if black played d5. I don't have much time because I need to cover the declined variation. So Black can try d5, at which point white would capture the pawn. Black brings out the knight, attacking the pawn, developing a piece. Bishop to c4, white protects the pawn. The knight can capture it anyways. Now white will castle. Just to notice that for white, these two files are, this one's open. This one is partially open, the F file. Bishop to e7, sort of blocking the file and preparing the castle. d4. Now attacking the pawn on here, on f4. Bishop to e6. Bishop takes, queen takes, and then this bishop takes the f4 pawn, and then black will bring out its knight to knight to c6. So let's back up to cover the King's Gambit decline. So what happens if black decides not to take the pawn? Well, there's two common moves for black. They're d5 and bishop to c5. So let me cover d5. Let me cover both of these quickly. So what happens when black plays d5? Well, basically white will take the d pawn. Black will take the f pawn. Now white will develop its knight there, sort of like I said, blocking the queen from going to this square, or preventing that move. Black will play knight f6. Notice how there's a lot of common moves or themes in the various variations. Bishop to c4, protecting the pawn, but black just gets it anyways. Now white castles. Bishop to e6. Bishop to b3, because now this bishop is sort of hanging there in space, and it needs to be protected, so white falls back to a position to where it's protected by a pawn. Bishop to e7, developing the bishop and preparing the castle. c4, poking the knight away. It goes back to b6, and then there's this is where there's different moves possible, and I'm going to stop right there. I know we're only 8 moves in, but from here it gets a little complicated, and there's various plans. So let's cover. Let's back up. Where I said instead of this move, let's cover bishop to c5. This move. Okay, so bishop to c5, and this is one of the older variations. This is probably a very common variation before the, modern era of chess, or maybe before the other variations came to be popular. Knight f3, once again protecting the h4 square, so the queen can't go to h4 for black. d6, freeing the bishop here and protecting this square. c3, white is preparing to play d4, one of the goals of king's pawn opening. Knight f6. Now white takes the pawn, black recaptures. Then the knight will take this pawn. Queen to e7. Obviously now the knight's going to have to move away or will be lost, and this pawn will fall. And the kings are both in the center on an open file, which will be shortly. Very dangerous situation. d4. White will play d4 first. Black will draw back its bishop to d6, attacking the knight. White will play the knight back. Black plays knight takes e4. Notice if the knight moves away, it will be a discovered attack upon the king. Not a good idea. Like, for example, if white does something dumb, like moving its knight to here, black can easily, well, maybe I should make that a different color. move the knight to here, taking the pawn, giving discovered check or something. I don't know. That's just one. Maybe not the best move, but just an idea of the discover check. White will block the file and develop the bishop, and both sides will castle. So that's the basics of the King's Gambit declined. That also ends my lecture on the King's Gambit.